Welcome to the video discussion of our third characteristic of a good tax, efficiency. As far as your textbook is concerned, efficiency comes in two flavors. Number one, economic neutrality, and number two, influencing taxpayer behavior as intended. Now, economic neutrality does not mean that taxes have no effect on financial incomes. We know from our previous discussion in dynamics that taxes almost certainly do have some effect. We may not know how much, but we're pretty sure it's there. In this case, economic neutrality is concerned with the optimal allocation of resources. That is, taxes should not be an impediment to allocating resources to the greatest and best use. As an example, let's say that a jurisdiction decides to levy a new tax on cola-flavored soft drinks, but not on other flavors. What is likely to happen to the price of cola beverages? Think about our example of hotels in Florida. With lower prices and margins, what reaction will cola manufacturers have? Less demand for cola means less production of cola and less return from cola. As a result, investment in cola decreases, while presumably non-cola investment increases. Is the world better off if we all consume less cola-flavored beverages and instead enjoy other flavors? This is taxes having an effect on the allocation of resources away from cola and into other areas. The current tax code permits a deduction for interest related to debt on a personal residence. It also permits a deduction for property taxes on the same property. What would you expect to happen if those tax advantages were removed or reduced, as has been done in the recent tax reform? The returns on those investments would decrease, and thus the price of that property. A real estate market effect would be expected in the lower prices direction. One might argue that we currently over-allocate resources to personal homes as a consequence of these tax breaks. Are you better off in a McMansion or having a retirement plan? I'm not going to answer that, but I know for sure that I can't live in my pension plan. The other perspective on efficiency is actually wanting taxes to affect behavior. For example, it's quite possible that Congress loves real estate and as a result has a strong proclivity towards allocating resources into that sector. There is definitely some research that supports that homeowners keep a nicer property, have a stronger community, and are more financially stable. Taxes can be used in such a way to bring about desired consequences. We've talked about efforts to stimulate the economy through tax cuts. More targeted tax changes can also be used. For example, during the financial crisis, the Obama administration cut the Social Security tax from 6.2% to 4.2%. Since almost all taxpayers incur this tax, this sort of tax cut was thought to end up directly in the hands of consumers who spend such money. During W's terms, he actually had the IRS issue early refunds before the year was even up, trying to put money in the hands of taxpayers to spend it, stimulate the economy. At times over the past few administrations, the tax law was changed to permit businesses to deduct the entire cost of property, plant, and equipment rather than depreciate it over the time in an attempt to stimulate the economy. All these efforts met with somewhat tempered effect. As taxpayers, we should know that unless federal spending is also cut, eventually the bills will come home on future taxes. In late 2017, tax cuts were implemented again at an estimated cost of somewhere between 0.7 to 1.4 trillion. These were designed to stimulate the economy and almost certainly will. However, remember, we are financing debt with future taxes, and this has the deficit hawks asking, is this the right time? Why manipulate taxpayer behavior at all? Why not let the market do its thing? If people want more cola, let them have it. Sometimes we want to affect taxpayer behavior at the behest of society. For example, imagine a community with a lake, and that lake is a food source for fish for the citizens to eat. However, with every citizen fishing the lake, it soon becomes overfished and stocks are depleted. Now, there are fewer fish available than before, and citizens don't have enough to eat. There are a couple ways to deal with this problem. One is to regulate fishing. All fisher persons are required to have a license. Fish under X inches must be released. The total number of fish caught cannot exceed Y, etc., etc. This is a regulatory approach to solving this problem. Another way to deal with this problem is to tax the catching of fish. You must pay a $1 tax for each fish caught. This raises the price of fish and thus lowers demand. It also creates revenues that the government can use to manage the fish supply in the lake. This unique form of such a tax was espoused by an early economist named Alfred Pigou, and these taxes are known as Pigouvian taxes. The classic economics problem of pollution as an externality is often thought of as remedied through Pigouvian taxes. Strategies like cap and trade or a carbon tax along the lines of a Pigouvian solution. I definitely sit squarely in the Pigouvian camp over strict regulation, but I can see room for both in our world. Now let's consider something like a negative tax, more along the lines of a tax advantage of residential housing. When the tax law permits certain taxpayers an advantage, that is known in the world of tax policy as a tax expenditure. You may also have heard terms such as loophole, tax break, etc. The tax code is absolutely fraught with such items, but they may not always work exactly as you think they do. Since the first oil embargo of the 1970s, the prevailing wisdom in the U.S. has been that we are too reliant on foreign oil, and we should therefore use more fuel-efficient autos. There was a short respite in the 1990s. However, especially in 1970, fuel efficiency technology was non-existent, and therefore increases in fuel efficiency come at a considerable cost to the car manufacturer, not to mention the risk that consumers will not buy new fuel-efficient cars. The thought was, how can taxes stimulate the development of more fuel-efficient cars? How about we provide a tax credit to the consumer that purchases a fuel-efficient car like an electric car or a hybrid vehicle? But wait, that is a credit to the buyer, not the manufacturer. How does that make the cost of developing the technology cheaper? So let's assume a normal car sells for $30,000 and costs the manufacturer $20,000 to build. But in order to cover the $30,000 cost of developing new technologies, a fuel-efficient car is priced at $35,000. The manufacturer has little incentive to invest in fuel-efficient cars, as the margin on normal cars is much higher. Now the government decides to sweeten the deal and provides a $5,000 credit to consumers that purchase a fuel-efficient car. Like employers setting wages, the auto manufacturers are not dumb and immediately raise the price of the fuel-efficient car by the amount of the credit. It now sells for $40,000, but still $35,000 to the consumer after the credit. That credit is passed on to the manufacturer through the increased sales price, thus increasing margins and providing incentive to manufacture fuel-efficient cars. Voila! This is exactly how that program was designed. It was never meant to lower the cost for consumers. It was meant to stimulate manufacturers to make more fuel-efficient vehicles. In this case, a tax expenditure was used to affect taxpayer behavior. If you are interested in tax expenditures, the Joint Committee on Taxation issues a report each year. In recent time, the biggest tax expenditures come from a deferral of taxes on foreign income of U.S. corporations. The previously mentioned home ownership advantages, lower tax rates on dividends and capital gains, and the exclusion from income of healthcare insurance paid for by an employer. Unfortunately, this analysis has not been performed since the recent tax cuts, so we can't know for sure the outcomes, but we know that the foreign corporate earnings and state tax exclusions have been affected and therefore likely reduced. Now we bring an efficient close to video T2E. The next video is a family favorite on taxes and fairness. Thanks for watching.